Hi, I'm Vaughn Gray, and there's this question that's always really captivated me, which is who are we and how do we live best? And if you look at our world, it's funny, humanity has sort of been seeking the same fundamental things throughout all of history. On the one hand, we're seeking answers to these really, really deep questions, maybe consciously, maybe unconsciously. And on the other hand, all of us are pretty much consciously seeking a certain type of life. And I like to break down what we're seeking in life into three categories: health, happiness, and success. And I want to define them really, really broadly. Health is the ideal functioning of the body. Happiness is the mind existing in a state that feels really great to us and leaves us energized and enthused. And success is sort of like total like eudaimon. It's this work that the Greeks had where everything in us just comes together and produces really the highest level of human existence. And with man questing after this for millennia, the idea that we can really simply understand the answers to all of this in maybe a 5 to 10 minute video might seem absurd, but I'm going to give it a go. So follow through here with me. I've got this really simple diagram on the wall. And the H and the B stand for two words that are essential to understanding this theory: harmony and balance. So what I really got here is an equation. And I'm looking at the same equation at three different levels to answer these three things that I think all of us are basically seeking: health, happiness, and success. On the level of the body, the equation means that harmony gives rise to balance, which produces health. Same thing on the level of the mind. Harmony gives rise to balance, which produces happiness. And same thing on the level of, I've left this blank square here, we're going to talk about what should actually belong here. Harmony equals balance equals success. So let's start off at the level of the body, because I think this is the easiest to understand. We're engaged in this constant battle to achieve health as a culture, and it's not going very well. And chronic disease rates are just soaring off the charts: obesity, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, you name it. And there's been this emergence of this idea of like holistic health or alternative health in recent years. And if you penetrate down to the essence of what people are seeking in this idea of holistic health, it's kind of the idea that the body should be healthy, and that if we can establish the right conditions, the body will be healthy. So where we stand as a culture is science sort of embraces sickness and ill health like they're just facts, and then tries to understand the molecular biology of those facts, and then tries to address that through drugs and surgery. The holistic movement more kind of asks this question: is there a certain nature or design to the way that the human body is built? And if we understand that nature or design, are there ways that we can live better based on that nature or design that will actually help us be healthy? And the way I approach the question is to say, absolutely, human beings, like any animal that's ever existed in the history of the world, have a basic biological nature. And consider two animals. Consider a hummingbird and a polar bear. Both animals have a basic nature. A hummingbird's nature is it's designed to live in a warm tropical environment and have very, very frequent meals that are almost entirely liquid carbohydrates, nectar sucked out of flowers. The nature of a polar bear is it's designed for a very cold environment. It's designed to eat infrequently and consume these big, heavy fat and protein meals, like small whales or seals. If you took a polar bear and moved it to the Virgin Islands and forced it to eat fruit nectar, the animal would be very, 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 very sick, because it would be living a life that was radically out of harmony with its nature. Its biology, its physiology aren't adapted to those conditions and to that kind of lifestyle. Similarly, if you put a hummingbird in the North Pole and you asked it to live off a diet of, whale meat, the animal would instantly perish because its physiology aren't adapted. So both creatures have a nature, and for those creatures to thrive, they have to actually live in harmony with that nature. When they do live in harmony with that nature, it produces a state that you could characterize as biochemical balance. Their cellular metabolism works right. The levels of sugars and proteins flowing through their blood are correct. All sorts of different mechanisms within the body are aligned and working in harmony together. I use this word balance to sum all of that up, and it produces this condition that we call health, the optimal functioning of the body. And it's similar for us as human beings. We walk around with a lot of bizarre myths about human health. I think many people think we're living longer, healthier lives because of science and technology, and that's not really true. The longest lived, healthiest people on the planet tend to actually be pre-moderns. They tend to be people in cultures that are living a lot more the way our ancestors lived thousands of years ago. Places like on the Greek islands or in Sardinia, the Hunza Valley in Pakistan, Okinawa, Japan. There are many different populations that have been studied over many decades who live into their 80s, possibly even their early 90s, have very little cancer, very little heart disease, virtually no type 2 diabetes, and they don't have modern medicine. Really what they're doing is they're living in harmony with human biological nature, which is creating this state of internal balance that produces health. They're eating all natural diets, they're moving in natural rhythms, they're waking and sleeping in more natural rhythms, they're free of environmental exposures. So this question, how can we be healthy as a culture, it's kind of being answered successfully by many cultures on Earth today, just not Western culture, following something like this simple formula that I've put up. Human beings have a nature. On the physical level, we need to live in harmony with that nature in terms of our environment and our lifestyle. This produces an internal state of balance, and then that produces health. Okay, cool. So this is actually being achieved. I want to take the same model and apply it to happiness. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to get that balance at the level of the mind is kind of like what happiness is. When you think about a happy person, they tend to be more balanced. Unhappy people can get super, super excited when things go well, and then they crash and they're miserable when things go badly, or they have violent emotional reactions to things that go on in their life. The really happy people tend to kind of roll with the punches, you know. Sure, tragedy gets them down, but they sort of come back into themselves. There's sort of a state of mental resilience, and I really like this idea of mental balance. Well, my theory is that balance comes from harmony. And now we have to take a leap into a little bit more of an abstract way of looking at things. Up here, I'm talking about balance coming from harmony with the nature of the body. On this level, I'm talking about balance coming from harmony with the nature of the mind. So we have to accept this idea that just like we have a physical nature, like a polar bear has a physical nature, a hummingbird has a physical nature, we have a physical nature. We also have a mental nature. And I think this is a little harder for people to grasp because obviously it's not concrete. There's no way that you can look with your physical senses and apprehend much about human mental nature because the mind is a non-concrete thing. And yet it makes inherent sense, right, that there's a way that the mind works, that we do have a mental nature. A couple things about this question of human mental nature need to be noted right off the bat. One, Western culture has only really looked at this for about a century and a half. As much as an in-depth and sophisticated and complex scientific study of the body are kind of new, the study of the mind is much, 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 much newer. And Eastern cultures have sort of sought this intuitive understanding of the mind. And if you say to someone, more from a Buddhist or a Hindu or an Eastern background, that happiness is sort of all about understanding and living in harmony with the mind, it makes an instant sense to them. But that philosophy hasn't really mapped onto Western culture yet. So follow me through this. Obviously, the mind has some kind of nature. There's a way that the mind works. And I'm going to assert that as you come to understand how the mind works, you can actually train yourself to think and look at the world in a way that's more aligned with or harmonious with the nature of the mind, that over time, through consistent application, produces a more balanced state of mind that tends to lead you in the direction of happiness. So just like you can come to understand the nature of your body, you can understand the way that it balances blood sugar, you can understand what your adrenal glands need, you can understand how your liver works, and you can, through practice, you can learn how to eat and move and breathe and live in a way that is in harmony with the nature of your body, which produces balance, which tends to create health. You can do the same thing with your mind. But you have to learn about it, you have to understand it, and then you have to practice living in harmony with it to produce this balance, to produce happiness. This is something that hasn't been done a lot on planet Earth yet, and it actually holds enormous potential. We tend to seek happiness more by looking out into the world and trying to achieve some form of external success. We think that getting relationships or getting ahead or things like that will make us happy. One, it doesn't work. Two, we really struggle to do it because we don't understand how it all comes together. One, it's very hard to be successful if you aren't already happy and healthy, because the health of the body produces the foundation for creating success, and also you need a lot of mental energy, and you need positivity, you need focus, you need the ability to roll with the punches in order to get to success. So depending on success for happiness is a totally backward formula. In many ways, health and happiness are a foundation for success. But further, we don't really understand the way we work. And this is the point in this presentation I want to make a really daring and bold declaration. Humanity has always been seeking basically this. We all want to be healthy, we want to be happy, we want to succeed, with very, very few exceptions. One thing that we've never done as a species, not really, which is kind of astonishing, is collectively get that we're never going to get this until we understand what we are. We more kind of assume a bunch of things about ourselves and the way that life works, and then we run out and we try to live our lives and achieve this without understanding ourselves. And this whole model is predicated on the idea that self-understanding is fundamental. Because to achieve health and happiness, you got to live in harmony with the nature of your body and your mind, and if you don't understand it, you're not going to do it. So this is the foundation, understanding how harmony produces balance, produces health and happiness, to talk about this big one, in some ways the hardest part here to talk about, which is success. And I am again going to assert that harmony produces balance, which produces success. Now we got to talk about what's in this box. We could write the word life in this box and say at the level of life, achieving harmony with life produces balance, produces success. I think that's a little abstract and too hard to grasp. What I really want to put in this box is a capital S-E-L-F, the word self. Somewhere deep within you, within all of us, there's something called our self. There's our actual beingness. It's like the core level of who we really are. And that self actually has a nature. And you'll find that a successful life is really more of a harmony or a resonance with that self, where you live in balance with that deepest dimension of who you are. And here's the coolest part. In many ways, you discover the nature of that self by finding this harmony which produces balance. You know, someone just feels a calling to look in the direction of art or music and they've never done that before. And then they find they have an ability to do art and music. And they find a fulfillment in it that they never found before. And suddenly they find they have more energy and they're really thriving and there's a sense of passion and joy as they begin to produce art or music and give it to the world. This is someone beginning to live in harmony with their actual self. And what's fascinating about when that happens is you notice that it starts to balance their life. With that focused passion, it's easier for the person sometimes to be in relationships. It's a little easier even for them to eat a little better. And then through consistently finding that harmony and almost like expressing that self, they find success in the world. They start to give something out to the world. So we'll get back to this, and this will be a little clearer as I make this next point. Each of these levels actually depends on the other. And now that we're talking about this level of self, you got to start to see how it depends on the level of the mind and the body. And the order of dependence is as written. Harmony at the level of the body actually depends on harmony at the level of the mind. This is really cool. One, it is very, very difficult to live a healthy lifestyle when you're unhappy. If you've ever tried to go on a diet or exercise consistently or get enough sleep when you're unhappy, it's virtually impossible. On the other hand, when you get yourself in a better state of mind, it is much easier to live in harmony with your physical nature, produce balance, and get to health. But also, fascinatingly, your happiness, pure mental states, has a radical, direct impact on the balance of the body. When you're stressed, it changes your biochemistry. When you're depressed, it changes your biochemistry. Right now, you could sit here and think along one strain, think about the people you've loved, think about the things in the world that inspire you, think about, all the things that you can see yourself changing the world. This will change your neurochemistry. If you keep thinking that way, that neurochemistry will send signals to the body that will change your biochemistry. And if you keep doing that, in time it'll change your physiology. Your mind can actually alter yourself physically. So the state of the mind is actually a critical part of achieving harmony and balance at the level of the body. Utterly astonishing and really, really true. No one can actually deny this when they look at the science. I'm going to take the next step now, though, and say that happiness at the level of the mind is actually in many ways dependent on harmony with this thing called the self. You have a core nature, and if you're not living in harmony with that core nature, it is very difficult to be balanced at the level of the mind. You're actually sort of out of harmony with the function of the mind, because in many ways, the function of the mind is to express yourself or your core nature. It's kind of what it's there for on one level. If what you are is an artist, or if what you are is a leader, or if what you are is a caregiver and someone who's really all about giving love and supplying a community, if you're not tapping into that and living in harmony with yourself, it's actually virtually impossible to achieve this state up here and produce happiness. So it's very strange. These seeming levels of our being each depends on the one below it, and this level is absolutely the most fundamental, the level of life or the level of self. When you begin to understand these three dimensions of you, the body, the mind, and your core nature or yourself, call it your spirit, call it your soul, you begin to realize that what you really are, that question I began with, who or what are we and how do we live best, is something that you can discover. And what's extraordinary is you're discovering who you are by the fact that all of these things are coming into harmony, producing balance, and producing these states. You are living into and discovering who you are when you start to feel healthier, happier, and that glow, that synergy, that coming together of self that is true success in life, which also tends to produce things that are really good that go out into the world that people receive and honor and recognize. Although that's secondary. Really, you are the measure of your success. Are you loving what you're doing? Do you feel like you're thriving? Do you feel like you're self-expressed? That's the real measure of success. That's living in harmony with who you really are. That will create a balanced life. A life that balances career, a life that balances your well-being, a life that balances family, a life that balances spirituality and the quest for deeper meaning. Whatever all of that is for you, whatever these elements of balance that are constitutive to the life that you want to live, that's what real success is. As you live into this, you begin to really discover who and what you are. And that journey of discovery is what provides fulfillment, purpose, and a meaning to life. So this is really a framework to begin investigating a meaningful answer for us as individuals, which could become a meaningful answer for our culture to the biggest questions that have occupied humanity throughout all of history. What are we? How do we live best? How can we all simply have the things that all of us have been seeking? Thanks so much for listening, and if you have any questions, please reach out and get in touch.